For those of you who come early, especially those of you in the room, it's a very particular meditation object to be hearing the sounds of people walking in the room and the kids off in the distance in the other room. You know, it's like we always like sitting next to a waterfall or when the wind's blowing through the trees. But it's a really nice sound, hearing people come in the room and coughing and adjusting their posture. And yeah, so just because otherwise the habit of the mind might turn it into something irritating. Like, God, when is this going to begin? But actually, we can have a different attitude about the experience. Like, so just if you, once you get settled, close your eyes and then just contemplate that, just in that receptive way, the sounds of the room, the sounds of the space. You know, mentioned also as we're settling in, especially again for the people in the room, as opposed to the Zoom community, we have a refinement of our COVID or health policy here at the center. You know, we don't, haven't for many years now required masks, don't check vaccines or anything like that. But we do want to take care of everybody. And always there are going to be people in the room who are immune compromised, whether they know it or not, and or just people who, for whatever reason, don't want to get sick with a cold or whatever. I'm one of those people now. I have a pretty serious disease, and the way they manage it is they take away my immune system. So, but I'm probably not alone in the space. So if you have any symptoms, flu, cold symptoms, then we ask you to either stay at home and watch the program, join the program online, or if you want to be in person and you feel it's appropriate, then wear a good mask, an N95 mask, and we always have them in the lobby. And that way you're taking care of yourself and taking care of other people in the community. And so that's kind of the thing. We're going to try to develop that sensitivity. The program hosts might even go up to somebody at some point who appears to have respiratory symptoms, let's say. And they may say, well, it's just my cat. I'm allergic to my cat. But regardless of what you imagine the cause for respiratory or flu-like symptoms might be, wear a mask if you're going to be in person in the community. It's just kind of the new world I think we're all in. But never feel like you have to wear a mask unless you have a good reason to wear a mask, like you have symptoms, or you just don't want to pick up anything somebody else has. So let's go ahead and settle in for our meditation time now. Appreciate this body that we can come home to. Not the idea of the body, but actually the sensations of the sitting body. And of course, for each of us, that will be unique or distinct. And although, of course, we're going to have an idea, a mental image of the body, we're particularly interested in the dynamic of sensation, the feeling. Sitting feels like this. And of course, the omnipresence of Siri. It's never happened before. For those online, my phone just spoke back. And although it may be appropriate to make some adjustments to our sitting posture initially, at some point, we want to have this attitude that the qualities that are moving in our bodies, that it's good enough. It may not be even pleasant at all, or even neutral, maybe unpleasant sitting, the sensations of sitting. But we allow the experience, the movement of sensation to be what it is, because that's a wholesome way to be relating to the sitting body right now, as opposed to having some conflict or needing the body to be different. As long as we're alive, as long as we have a body and a mind, there's going to be this great river, changing river, moving river of what we call in Buddhism feeling or feeling tone. The movement of pleasant experience and unpleasant experience and neutral experience. And this is both in terms of our five senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and all the touches. But even our mental activity in moments is pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So in this sense, all of us were exposed or we're being touched by this movement of feeling. And maybe that's okay to be exposed to whatever this moment feels like. The thoughts and emotions, the sounds, the sensations in our bodies. Maybe, and we want to check this out, maybe it's okay to be feeling what we're feeling. Not to have to do something about what we're feeling, but just to be aware that we're feeling now what we're feeling. So in that sense, the exposure to whatever feelings moving is the object of present moment awareness, our meditation object. And in doing that, we're realizing slowly over probably years of practice, but we're learning in a very deep way that it's okay to be feeling what we're feeling, that we don't have to react or get tight or slide into denial. That we can instead be alert. And even over time, we learn how to be truly, even profoundly interested in the way it is. This experience is being known, being felt. And as much as our minds might be inclined to react and get tight and want to judge, want to fix, we can learn, and we will learn gradually over time, that it's actually wiser to just allow things to be. Allowing thoughts to come and go, allowing emotions to come and go, sensations, sounds, sights, smells, tastes. So there's clear knowing, deep, clear feeling. We're not distant from our experience, but there's no friction. We're learning that the friction is optional and not helpful. So we learn how to abandon the resistance, the control, the judgment, the freaking out. And in a sense, we cultivate a taste for this exposure to our lives as a river a river of feeling, a river experiencing. We don't even need to make sense of it all. We just need to learn how to be right in the middle, interested or sensitive. This is where we find real, trustworthy freedom. The freedom of not having to run away and the freedom of not having to control. The freedom of letting life, nature be what it is right now, moving, changing, unfolding according to many causes and conditions. And just maybe it's okay that nature is like this now. Maybe it's okay being vulnerable, feeling what we feel, being right in the middle, soft, allowing, interested, alert. So let's continue in silence now. the primary skill that we're developing in meditation. It's not so much that we're trying to be interested, but we're recognizing this capacity we all have to be interested in reality or in the way it is. And we can start by using the experience, the ordinary experience of the body sitting. But it's really the totality of the present moment. But it's good to have something concrete initially, like feeling the breath coming in, or feeling the body sitting, or hearing the sounds in the room. And then when you stabilize that interest with something specific, then let it generalize to the totality of the present moment, all that's coming and going, all that the sensitive heart is sensitive to, all of what we're feeling. And learning there is this natural interest. And in part, what we're interested in is how it is that stress arises and how it is that getting tight can be released, can be abandoned. We all know moments when we feel all tied up in a knot, reactive or resistant, and really burdened by that pattern. And we probably also know moments when all that is released and the heart feels unburdened and light, free of being burdened. And whether we know it or not, the mind is naturally interested. In Buddhism, we call this suffering and the release of suffering. The mind is naturally interested in this, but we need to uncover that interest and recognize it and keep it in mind. And all that's happening immediately right here in our experience. And it doesn't require us thinking about it. It's all about observing what's already happening here, becoming intimate. So again, when there's a little stress or a lot of stress, we get interested in it as a conditional unfolding here in the experience of the body and the mind. And when there's no stress, no suffering, we get interested in it as something that's unfolding right here and now in the heart, body, mind. So it's not about fixing or trying to make something happen. It's really about being interested in this subtle, omnipresent, really, happening of suffering and its release. How it is that it comes to be, how it is that it falls away. If we're really interested in being free, then right now we practice being free with experiences that are coming and going. One particular instruction that I received from a teacher a long, long time ago, a Buddhist monk, he said, as best you can, let the body find some natural ease. And then allow the mind, as best you can, to find some natural ease. And then stay alert and notice what, if anything, interrupts that natural ease. Be interested in that interruption, that movement towards stress. Let it reveal its nature so we can learn. How is it that this heart, this mind gets bound up? How is it that this heart, this mind becomes unbound? This is what we mean in our tradition by the deepening of insight or the awakening process. We're learning something about how this heart of ours, not theoretically, but actually, how this heart of ours becomes bound up and how it is that it becomes unbound simply by observing in this non-judging, intimate way. A lot of freedom comes from this deepening insight. And take a little time, adjust your body. It's okay if you want to stand and stretch a little bit. And thanks again, everyone, for coming. For those who are new, my name is Mark Nunberg, one of the guiding teachers here. And if you've been around for a while, but not that long, you probably got to know Shelley Graff, who was teaching the Sunday morning program for a while during my sick leave. So right now, we have 4 weekly practice groups, kind of the main event at the center. We have the Sunday morning, which is hybrid, both online, so we have a quite large Zoom community, as well as all of you in the room. And then we have Sunday evening, which is just for the in-person community only. Shelley Graff usually teaches that. And then there's Wednesday night that Shelley has been doing for a long time. That's also hybrid, both here in person and online. You can join in on Zoom. And then starting not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, the 30th of April, and then continuing, will be a Zoom-only group, and that's 7 to 8:30, and I'll lead that. So Shelley leads 2, Sunday night and Wednesday night, and I lead 2, Sunday morning and Tuesday night, starting on the 30th. Just to kind of give you a sense of what's available, and these are always drop-in, so, and always have like a 35-minute guided meditation, talk, and discussion. And for the new one on Tuesday night, that will be Zoom only. Usually Sunday morning, because the kids are here and it's a little shorter, instead of being an hour and a half, it's just an hour and 15 minutes. We don't really have time for discussion, unless you stay for the small group discussion from 11:45 to 12. But on Tuesday night, we'll have more time for discussion and questions. So keep that in mind if that makes sense in your schedule. And the other thing I want to mention is that I've decided for these Dharma talks that I'll be giving for the next few months, I'm going to be drawing from this wonderful collection of talks that Ajahn Chah gave. Ajahn just means teacher. In Thai Buddhism, it's related to a Sanskrit word, acharya, which means teacher. So Ajahn is a teacher, and Chah is his monastic name. And I mentioned this last week, but there's a wonderful collection of his teachings, and he's quite influential in the Dharma that's come here, early Buddhism that's come here to the West. And that book, The Collected Teachings, and you can find a link. You can get that book for free online, the digital copy of it. And also you can listen to a well-known British monk reading the chapter. And that document that I've created is on our calendar under this Sunday morning, and eventually will be under the Tuesday too, where you could just find the link and then you can print a copy for yourself or just read it. And I'll also have excerpts from the chapter that I'm drawing on. So if you want to do a little study, you can do that. And this chapter is called The Peace Beyond. Kind of provocative. And it's really what I was trying to convey in the guided meditation today. Ajahn Chah once said in one of his talks, and he died in like around 1992, I think. It's just this very provocative thing, but remember it's a skillful means, it's a frame or a perspective we want to cultivate. But what he said is there are only 2 things, there's suffering and the release of suffering. And what he means by that, I think, is that when we live our life, that we're training our heart, our mind, to see that perspective, whether we're looking at somebody else or just observing our own experience in that moment. We're just realizing that that's the truly relevant thing about any moment of experience, suffering and its release. And we don't have to, a lot of times when you hear this, then we think, okay, I'm going to make myself be interested in suffering and the release of suffering. But that becomes very conceptual. So the pointing out instruction we get is that we're naturally interested, the mind, this mind, your mind, my mind, is already interested in suffering and release, tension and release. The thing is, we think we know a lot about it, so we go right from being interested to trying to do something about whatever suffering we're experiencing, or hold on to the release that we might be experiencing. What we don't do is express a real interest, because real interest requires humility, right? In order to be open, we can't have a fixed idea about suffering, my stress, why I'm stressed. I mean, we all know why we're stressed. It's that person in my life, or that situation in my life, or my body, or my illness, or my, life situation. And because we have this sort of definitive view about suffering, stress, my stress, your stress, the world's stress, we're not ever or rarely expressing a humble interest, a quiet sensitivity, a willingness to kind of let the truth, the underlying truth, not conceptual truth, but the actual dynamic, lived dynamic of this heart mind getting bound up and this heart and mind becoming unbounded at times. We're not letting it reveal itself. So we actually see how that happens lawfully. It doesn't just happen randomly when we get bound up, tied up in knots, really hurting. Or the kind of freedom that we bump into too, where we feel very light and free and unburdened and happy in that deeper sense. We like I mentioned, we tend to immediately tell ourselves a story. Oh, I'm happy because it's springtime and it's a nice day and the sun's shining. Or that this person smiled at me. And then we're content with that story. Or I'm upset because 2 days ago this person looked at me this way or said this thing to me, that was hurtful. And so I carry this experience of being burdened because that happened to me. And in the context of the story I have about me and my suffering, my stress, which we become dependent on, and we're really into being consistent. So I can't be free, I can't be light, I can't be released, because the world is the way that it is, so I got to be tight. Or that situation happened to me, so I got to be tight. So we live according to the stories we have about the world, about ourselves, about each other, instead of just getting interested in a simple, humble way, paying attention. And that's really what our practice is all about. So, just in light of this chapter, this is chapter 2 in that collection, the Collected Teachings of Ajahn Chah. It's called, like I mentioned, The Peace Beyond. And he talks about what in our tradition is considered to be the first talk the Buddha gave, the Dhamma Chakka Pavatana Sutta, setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion. Dhamma is kind of this word that has some different meanings, including the teachings of the Buddha, but also Dhamma means the truth of the way it is. So in that first talk the Buddha gave to some friends that he had been practicing with, but they had been doing a lot of ascetic practices, and then the Buddha came to understand the dead end of thinking that because indulging in sense experience is a dead end, no matter how rich you get, no matter how much you eat or have, it doesn't ultimately make you happy. So in a lot of places in the world at different times, there was this sort of flip. Well, if indulging in sense experience isn't going to make me happy, I'm going to become a hermit, I'm going to become an ascetic, I'm going to give up on sense experience. I'm going to fast or, live in the forest without a home. And somehow thinking that the simplicity and the non-dependence says, clearly there's some problems with materialism and, consumerism and things, qualities, values that dominate our current society here. But kind of making a thing of having nothing can become just as much a trip, an attachment, an unhealthy way of being in the world as, thinking that having more is going to make me happy. So anyway, the Buddha kind of saw the limitations of asceticism. And I mentioned this last week. The first chapter was about the middle way. And the middle way is more profound than, not having too much, but not having too little, a little bit like the three bears. Oh, this is just right. I mean, that's kind of the superficial understanding of what the Buddha calls the middle way. But in a deeper way, it's like understanding the depth that sense experience will never make me happy. And rejecting sense experience will never make me happy. So I'm going to abandon any kind of mental, physical activity that is arising from the wrong idea that sense experience is going to make me happy. I mean, it clearly does deliver temporary happiness. When we're thirsty and then we drink, there's a happiness there. It's just not a lasting happiness. We've had, all of us, I hope, a lot of that ordinary level of happiness where a sense desire is quenched. We want to belong, and then all of a sudden we're included, And people say, hey, you want to go out? And that feels good, whatever it is. We've been sick, and then we heal, and we're not sick anymore. That feels really good. We're cold in January, not so much this year, and then it's spring, and it's nicer, and we feel good about that. But that good feeling, the pleasantness of having a desire quenched, is pretty limited. We might eat for lunch exactly what we've wanted to eat for a while. But how real and substantial is that happiness? About 12:30, we'll be looking for another sense experience to make us happy, because that happiness we got from having chili for lunch or whatever it is you like, it wasn't a very substantial happiness. It was ephemeral. It was limited. A lot of us, I hope, have been loved deeply, have had really good friendships. But it doesn't really take care of the existential uneasiness in our hearts. We're still looking for something to make us feel safe, or make us feel secure, or make us immune from getting pushed around by life. So that's what the Buddha means, that this dichotomy of thinking sense experience is going to do it for us, or when that gets frustrated and we feel betrayed by that, thinking that getting rid of sense experience is going to do it for us. He's saying, I've checked both of those out. It's not the way to real happiness or to freedom. And that's the middle way. And so then he offers the way. It's not that, it's not that. Let me give you some pointing out instructions. And that's really what this chapter 2, the peace beyond. It's really cultivating, and we have the advantage of having some pointing out instructions. We're not just floundering. But this way, what in our tradition we call the Four Noble Truths. This is what was there in that first Dharma talk that got recorded, orally for 500 years and then eventually written down. And setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion, he goes through the Four Noble Truths, which is really just not a theory, not a philosophy, not metaphysics. It's really a practice. It's 12 insights really that unfold naturally when we get interested in dukkha, in the truth of stress and suffering. And a lot of us who've been at the practice for a long time, been a student of the Buddhist teachings for a long time, one of the really fun things to do is hear people's Dharma stories, like how did you get into Buddhism, or how did you get into meditation or your practice? And for a lot of us, we were drawn or attracted. One of the aspects of these teachings is they're very pragmatic, because they acknowledge right up front the reality of stress, of dukkha, that there's something about being human, having a human life, that is inherently limited or frustrating or unsatisfactory. We can't quite get to that place where we're golden forever, right? And please, this would be a good time, like if you think that's not true and you're there, then raise your hand. It's like, no, I really found that place. I'm there. Nothing bothers me. And not only does nothing bother me, nothing can bother me. That the heart, the mind is free no matter the conditions. So the Buddha was interested. He wasn't interested in a life where you're just sort of navigating as best you can in a limited way. He was interested, well, is there, let's call it the unconditioned? Is there a way of being, an understanding that liberates the heart in a way that is unconditioned, isn't dependent, no matter the conditions, whether I'm dying or experiencing great loss or won the lottery or finding every success in life? The heart, in one way or another, remains undisturbed or unmoved, unburdened by success or failure, ordinary happiness or unhappiness. I think last week I mentioned the simile Ajahn Chah uses about the log. For those who were here, did I talk about the log going down the river? I meant to, if I didn't. But anyway, it's a well-known simile that he used, just in these very ordinary ways, trying to paint a picture of our human situation. He says it's like being the mind, the heart is like a log floating down a river. And on one side, on one bank is happiness, and on the other bank is unhappiness. And our job isn't to kind of avoid the unhappiness bank or hang out and get attached to the happiness bank, but not to be confused or dependent or attached to either bank. That's how the mind flows into nibbana, into this place of release, freedom, no matter the conditions. Because otherwise, we imagined a privileged situation for us, where everything is the way we want it to be, and people treat us the way we want to be treated. And two things, trying to get to that place is stressful and generally causes us to create stress for other people. And if we ever get to that place we imagine is stress-free, it turns out not to be stress-free, as I've been saying. And the truth is, you're going to keep checking that out. So if you don't believe what the direction the Buddha is pointing us in, then go ahead, check that out. Try to be happy in these ordinary ways that humans try to be happy. Just be honest with yourself. And you can do it by checking out your own experience, but intuiting the experience of those around you. Who do we know that is deeply free and unburdened, no matter what goes on in their lives? And how are they relating? What do they understand? What are their values or their attitudes? What happens if I start to adopt and to experiment? So the Four Noble Truths, it's this process, and it begins in this for me, was so trustworthy, as someone just out of college and hearing these teachings and the Buddha talking about, there is dukkha, there is this unavoidable truth of conditioned experience, like having a sensitive heart, a knowing mind, vulnerable or exposed to the changing conditions, internal and external. There's something inherently stressful or unsatisfactory about that because I can't nail it down. I can't nail happiness down. And the next insight first is just to acknowledge. And I remember, and I'm sure all of us have had our own version of this, but the one that really stands out, I mean, I think it started in middle school actually, but the one that really stands out is junior year in high school. And it was just so clear, like all of my attempts to be happy, I started to see as being endless. Like I wanted to be a really good athlete. I was really into running, track, and cross country, and reasonably good. And but no matter what success I had, I wanted to be better. And same academically, same socially. And I started to see this, my junior year in high school. It's like I don't see an end to this. It's just more of the same. And it was real kind of an existential crisis, which was really good because it made me curious about dukkha. Right? So that's where we go from thinking we know what to do with dukkha, with the unsatisfactory or the insecure, the vulnerable, the challenging aspects of life, to realizing, yeah, there are those vulnerable, insecure, difficult aspects of life, and I don't know what to do about it. So I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to be interested. What works, what doesn't work, both in terms of my own relating, but just observing other people too, and especially those who appear to be wise or say they're wise. Well, what if and then we'll check it out. Just like we want to do with the Buddhist teachings. We don't want to believe the Buddhist teachings are correct. We want to hear them, see if they make sense just on that superficial level, and then if they do, check them out in your own experience. So the Buddha says, like, as you're living your ordinary life, you don't have to change anything. Just be interested in, everything that's frustrating you watching a good show, and then the commercial comes on. Oh yeah, this is dukkha. You had a really nice evening with the friends, and you got to go home. Oh, this hurts. It's like you see something you want to buy, and you realize, oh, I have to go into debt to get that. Or you try to have a interaction with another person, and you realize how difficult it is to convey your ideas. It's like when I say something to somebody, I really want them to understand. Have you ever caught yourself like, almost like you want to grab the person by the collar? No, you don't get, this is what, it's like you're not satisfied, but you can never really, because they're always going to be interpreting what you say the way they're going to be interpreting it. You can't do the mind meld, and make that person see it, believe it, understand it the way you want them to. They're their own, unfolding of nature. We don't even know how they're saying. It's like for those of us, like I've been with my partner now for well over 30 years. Let's see, we got to know each other in 89 and have been living together since 91. And, but, honestly, it's so funny. It's like on the one hand, there's, profound intimacy and trust and like a lot of really beautiful, wholesome qualities. But on the other hand, it's like, I don't know who you are. And you don't know who I am. And it's that, I'm sure this is not unfamiliar to many of you. It's like this honest sense of not only do we not know each other, but we don't even know who we are, really. And then that just comes alive sometimes in moments when we're more honest. And instead of like covering it up with denial or some story we put on the situation, we learn actually we can inhabit that. And this is really the second insight. There is dukkha. And then the second insight is this recognition, this deep insight. Oh, this should be understood. Like, I need to start orienting my life around this interest in dukkha. Often in Buddhism, we just stop translating dukkha as suffering because suffering is just too limited a word for what dukkha points to. Because it does mean that kind of ordinary level of pain, unpleasantness. But it's also this more subtle, unnerving aspect of conditional life, that because life is unfolding always, never stopping, we never get to that. Like conceptually, we imagine we need solid ground, a permanent, safe place, but it's nowhere to be found. It's just not in the cards in conditional reality. So vulnerability and security is just sort of natural given the conditions, given the situation. So we want to, instead of thinking that it's a problem, we switch it to thinking it's a teacher. That's the second insight. This is a teacher. This is like my most important teacher. You might have had really valuable teachers, mentors in your life, good friends, but none of them will be ultimately more valuable than your own relating wisely in that humble, open way to your own experiences of vulnerability, insecurity, uncertainty, unpleasantness, fear, all the different ways we bump up against the truth of experience is limited, can't be controlled, can't be locked in. And when we cultivate a long-term, honest, deep, respectful relationship with dukkha as our teacher, then the third insight will arise. Dukkha has been understood. There is dukkha. It should be understood. It has been understood. And then with those first three insights, that's the first noble truth, those first three insights, there is dukkha. It should be understood. It's my teacher. I'm going to be in relationship with it. I'm not going to forget you. It has been understood. We've succeeded moved our way through the curriculum. And all the little and bigger places in our life, we've kept this theme in mind. And I really invite you to do that today. Even if today is the best day of your life, there's dukkha even in really nice days, like Monday's coming. So, whatever that might mean to each of us, or it's going to end, the day's going to end, the weather will change, or whatever is making today nice for you. You're having a delicious lunch and then you get full, and there's more food, but you can't eat anymore because it's already unpleasant. Over and over again. I mean, I stumbled upon being sick, I've watched more TV than I normally do, and I have stumbled upon a couple of really good shows, because that's just the desperation of needing good entertainment is its own suffering. But then when you find it, it's like either you run out, the episodes end and there's no more, or you realize that even when there are more episodes, at some point your mind starts to get fried, right? Same with whether you're reading a book, a fun book, or even having a nice conversation with friends. At some point, it's like, I need, as much as I don't want it to end, I'm done with this. It's not fun anymore. So whether it's food or hiking or entertainment or whatever it might be, we can't really feed on it forever. There is dukkha. It has been. It should be understood. It has been understood. And that really sets us up to a deeper kind of learning, because now we have this stable relationship with dukkha in our life. And for me, this is like, when I see this in another person, it really makes that person trustworthy. Like as I get to know another person and I see that they, in their own way, it doesn't have to be, through the use of Buddhist language, but in their own way, if I sense that they have an honest relationship with this truth of human life, that there is dukkha, and I should pay attention, I should, in a humble way, and learn not to be afraid, because being afraid of, like, being in denial of it doesn't help. What helps is to learn from it. And this has really stood out in terms of my wife and Wen Fricke, who's the co-founder of Common Ground, one of our teachers here. And but when I was getting to know Wen in the early 90s, we were living at a yoga meditation place in Manhattan. I was teaching there, and when I was living there and doing some work there, I was also the treasurer. And Wen was working in the office, so we got to know each other that way. And she was a grad student at the time. But we had, it was a small group of people, we meditated if you were around, like I was there the whole time, 3 times a day, and did yoga and all kinds of great stuff. So it was a really great place for me to be at that time as a young person. And we had a meeting every Saturday, just kind of a go around with all the people, about 10 people who lived in this building in the West Village in Manhattan. And every time, it would be Wen's turn, and I'd realize, oh, this person knows something about dukkha. And I was probably physically attracted to her and a number of other things. But that was the thing, because I had been, even though I was in my 20s, I hadn't dated, I hadn't had sexual relationships with another person for 8 years, which is unusual for a 20-year-old, because I was really into my practice. But it wasn't really working very well either. So I was reconsidering that choice. But I think right? Relationships are complicated. So I was kind of like in this place where, like, I didn't want the complication because I was really into my practice, but it wasn't working so well because I'm a sexual being, and a lot of things work better being in relationship with another human being. But the thing that made that move to becoming partners easy for me is I saw that Wen really had an honest relationship with dukkha, right? In some ways, it's this realizing that avoidance or denial or plastering some story on our human experience just makes things worse. So at some point, we just start to put our arm around it. It's like, oh yeah, suffering, my old friend. Whether the particular suffering is longing or loneliness or, fear, anxiety, or existential angst, or not having what we want, or wanting something to be different than it is. But we embrace it, like, oh, this is interesting. Because even if it's just a little thread, there's a sense that difficulty is not optional for human beings, right? We're just vulnerable to change, to pleasure and pain, and gain and loss, and all the ways that life can unfold. We're just vulnerable. That insecurity is not going to go away. But we're told by our teachers, by the Buddha and our other teachers, that suffering is optional. The reaction, the stressful reaction to the vulnerability, to the insecurity, that's optional. Insecurity is not optional. Vulnerability to pain and pleasure is not optional, right? Things are unfolding, and we're not in control of how things unfold. I mean, we participate in how things unfold, but we're not completely in control. And trying to be completely in control is just another way to suffer, right? And giving up on participating is another way to suffer. But realizing that having that thread, that intuition, that suffering, that there's a possibility of being this vulnerable, living with this insecurity, this uncertainty, doesn't imply that the heart has to be burdened by it. And that's what we want to be interested in, because then we begin to get interested in the cause, like, oh, how is it that this heart gets burdened? When there's this, there's that. Like, what is it when it's there that my heart gets all tied up or gets all weighed down? And we even have, of course, the Buddhist pointing out instruction. He's basically saying when there's attachment or identification with desire, then there's suffering. And when that attachment or identification with desire drops away, then that burden drops away. Not the desire, but the wrong understanding of desire. Because, you and I, we have our preferences, we have our likes and dislikes. Things will be pleasant and unpleasant for us. And that, not wanting that to be true is that like, get me out of here, right? Which is just a different version of, oh, I want this, to, I don't want any of this. I don't want to be sensitive. I don't want to be exposed to pleasure and pain. Get me out of here. But that's stressful too. Being a sensitive human being and not wanting to be a sensitive human being is just another way to suffer. So the answer, the resolution is to stabilize our relationship with dukkha, those first three insights. There is dukkha, it's my teacher, it should be understood. Okay, I have a real, honest, stable relationship with it. It has been understood. Then we see, oh, there's a cause. This cause should be released. It has been released. And that this releasing of attachment, this releasing of identification, taking desire personally, is something that happens. It's not something that you or I do. It happens when we see that there is attachment or identification with desire, taking it personally, and seeing that it causes stress. It's like we've had a busy day, we go to bed at night, and we realize how wrapped up, entangled our heart and mind is, right? And we lie in bed, and we kind of deconstruct, oh yeah, I saw this person with this and that, and I had the thought, if I had that, I'd be really happy. They have the new iPhone, or they have a new partner, or whatever it is. They bought a lake home on a perfect lake in northern Minnesota, or whatever it might be. And it just sort of did something to our mind. We took the bait and we go, oh yeah, I thought it was happy, but if I had that, then I'd be really happy. And our mind's been chewing with it, and then now we're there in bed and uneasy, and we realize, oh, and then in that deconstruction, we can see that the problem isn't that when we heard about what that person has or saw what that person has, the problem wasn't that we recognize it as being pleasurable or exciting. The problem was the wrong idea that arose there in conjunction with the noticing that it was pleasant or exciting or whatever. Where basically how the mind projects or infuses a sense of a somebody who won't be happy until they get them. That's the extra part. That's what can be abandoned. But it's abandoned when it's seen. It doesn't fall away because we want it to fall away. I mean, we've all tried, like when we've been attached to something, like stop being attached. It doesn't work. We're want this or that. We tell us, oh, I shouldn't want that. Well, the heart does want what it wants. But we can see that wanting, that desire, as a movement of nature, impersonal. We don't have to take it personally, but it takes practice. That's the second three insights. There is a cause. It should be abandoned. It has been abandoned. This is happening immediately in our own experience. It isn't theoretical. It isn't conceptual. Whenever we're suffering, now this is the pointing out, and you want to check this out. You don't want to believe it. You want to check it out. But and we need to end. I see the kids are here. So we'll end with this point. So whenever there's stress or suffering, then because we're interested instead of reactive, we want to be interested, like, and we have the pointing out instruction. Okay, what's the mind attached to here? If there's suffering, there's got to be some identification, some attachment, even something as obvious as like a lot of physical pain. Because it seems so obvious that the physical pain is the problem, but it's actually the attachment to the not wanting to experience physical pain. And you can play it, don't work with the most intense physical pain, but kind of more ordinary pain. And realize I was just doing this during the sit today because I thought I'd be a good student. And, I have a lot of back pain. I have some recent compound fractures in my spine related to the medications I've been on. And so there's a lot of residual pain. And I was feeling it. I said, well, okay, pain. And then what's the pain when the attachment, the identification to the desire for the pain to be gone goes away? What is the unpleasantness of the pain without anything added to it? Unpleasantness being known. And that's for each of us to check out. And that brings us to the third, which is there is release, awakening, freedom. It should be fully realized. It has been fully realized. That's the third noble truth. But we'll leave it here. The kids are here to sing to us. So invite them in. Maybe you could open the door, let them know they can come on in. And while they're getting settled, I'll just mention a couple things that are going to happen. I mentioned the Tuesday group that's beginning on the 30th, but there's also a Buddhist studies class that's going to be hybrid, both online and in person here. And it's on dependent origination. It's actually not so different than some of what I've been talking about today. And the kids, you can take over the platform then. Move this lectern out of the way. And just so folks know, we also have a teen group at the center led by some of our leaders on alternating Sundays. Is that right, Gabe?